In a recent interview on Fox News with Maria Bartiromo, former President Donald Trump made several controversial statements that have reignited debates about his approach to governance, security, and the treatment of political adversaries. Trump's rhetoric often skews towards the dramatic, presenting a worldview that frequently divides allies and vilifies opponents. This video explores Trump's bizarre claims during the interview, particularly his suggestion that he might deploy the military against American citizens who oppose him, contrasting this with a more pragmatic approach of Governor Tim Walz of Minnesota. While Trump presents himself as a protector of women and national interests, his approach raises critical questions about the implications of his governance style for democracy and public trust. The Fox News interview, a propaganda fest? From the outset of his Fox News interview, Trump utilized familiar tactics that have characterized his public appearances: combative language and grandiose promises. He declared himself a champion for women, asserting, "I think I'm doing really good with women because women want protection. They want security." This self-portrait as a protector relies heavily on his perception of security threats, particularly regarding immigration, as he claimed they don't want to have migrants coming into their backyard. This framing taps into fears many Americans have about border security, using it as a rallying point to position himself as the candidate who prioritizes their safety. However, Trump's populist rhetoric quickly devolves into a more troubling territory when he begins to lash out at international allies, specifically the European Union. He accused them of taking advantage of the United States, stating, "We've been screwed by Mexico, by China, by Canada, and by the European Union." This attack on traditional allies highlights Trump's penchant for aligning himself with authoritarian figures like Vladimir Putin and Kim Jong-un, while simultaneously disparaging countries that have historically been U.S. partners. The underlying theme of Trump's comments points to a protectionist agenda that prioritizes his nationalist narrative over established diplomatic relationships. The threat of military action against American citizens. Perhaps the most alarming claim made by Trump during the interview was his suggestion that the military could be used to suppress dissent. He implied that if he felt threatened by the enemy from within, he would not hesitate to call on the National Guard or military forces. "We have some very bad people. We have some sick people, radical left lunatics, and I think they should be easily handled if necessary by the military," he said. This statement raises grave concerns about the militarization of domestic political conflicts and the implications of using armed forces against American citizens. While discussing security threats, Trump stated, "You've got 50,000 Chinese nationals in this country," and mentioned people on the terrorist watch list. By framing his political opponents as potential enemies, he blurs the lines between legitimate political discourse and accusations of treason, a tactic reminiscent of authoritarian regimes that suppress dissent through intimidation and violence. This rhetoric suggests a dangerous shift in how political differences are treated in America, posing significant risks to civil liberties. Comparing approaches, Governor Walz's common sense governance. In stark contrast to Trump's incendiary comments, Minnesota Governor Tim Walz presented a vision of governance rooted in collaboration and service to the public during his own appearances on Fox News. While Trump embodies a divisive, aggressive stance, Walz advocates for a more unifying approach focused on collective welfare and infrastructural development. In response to accusations of moving too far left, Walz emphasized his commitment to pragmatism and addressing the needs of everyday citizens. "We build our roads collectively together," he said, arguing that government should serve the public and not just cater to the wealthy elite. His assertion that one person's socialism is another person's neighborliness captures the essence of his argument, which counters the narrative pushed by right-wing commentators that any government involvement in public welfare constitutes socialism. Walz articulates a clear distinction between harmful authoritarianism and responsible governance that prioritizes community needs. When faced with accusations of socialism during his interview, Walz firmly defended his position, stating, "I believe in moral capitalism. I believe capitalism works and it lifts everyone up, but I also believe you have to make sure that there are things that we collectively do together." This nuanced understanding of government's role in society sharply contrasts with Trump's vision, which is rooted in a worldview that sees government primarily as an adversary to be conquered rather than a collaborative force for good. Abortion rights, a central theme in Republican politics. Another contentious issue raised during the Fox News interview was abortion, which continues to be a divisive topic within Republican politics. Trump's long-standing support for restrictive abortion laws came under scrutiny as J.D. Vance, a U.S. Senator from Ohio, reaffirmed his backing for a national abortion ban during the interview. Vance noted, "I think it's totally reasonable to say you cannot abort a baby after 15 weeks of gestation." This stance is indicative of the broader Republican strategy to frame abortion as a moral issue while simultaneously courting support from voters who may feel alienated by more extreme positions. However, the implications of such policies raise critical questions about women's rights and access to reproductive health services. Vance's remarks about shutting down Planned Parenthood illustrate a commitment to defunding organizations that provide essential health services to women, further complicating the landscape for reproductive rights. Critics argue that this approach disproportionately affects low-income families who rely on organizations like Planned Parenthood for not only abortion services, but also cancer screenings and birth control. The tariff conundrum, misunderstandings, and misrepresentation. Trump's comments on tariffs during the interview revealed a significant misunderstanding of economic principles. He spoke about imposing staggering tariffs, claiming they would protect American industries and bring jobs back to the U.S. However, tariffs are essentially taxes on imports, and imposing such high tariffs would likely result in increased prices for consumers. Trump's assertion that he could impose tariffs of 200% or even 500% without negative consequences for the American economy reflects a dangerous economic naivety that could lead to severe inflation and reduced purchasing power for American families. The former president's simplistic approach to complex economic issues such as trade and tariffs highlights his tendency to prioritize rhetoric over substance. By framing tariffs as an all-encompassing solution to economic problems, Trump ignores the potential fallout for American consumers and the broader economy. This lack of nuance is troubling, as it suggests a reliance on sound bites rather than informed policy discussions. The chaos of foreign policy. In the realm of foreign policy, Trump's interactions with global leaders raise eyebrows, particularly in light of his recent comments about Benjamin Netanyahu and the ongoing conflict in Israel. Trump's assertion that he had spoken to Netanyahu recently and that he supports a hardline stance against Iran indicates a continued alignment with aggressive foreign policies. His belief that chaos benefits his political ambitions highlights a concerning perspective where international stability is sacrificed for domestic gain. This approach mirrors his earlier tenure, where he often favored autocratic leaders over traditional U.S. allies. His remarks about Biden's communication with Netanyahu signal a dismissal of diplomatic norms, suggesting that effective governance is contingent on strongman tactics rather than collaboration and mutual respect. Such rhetoric not only undermines the bipartisan consensus that has historically guided U.S. foreign policy, but also threatens to destabilize international relations, leaving America vulnerable on the global stage. The electoral landscape, anticipating challenges. As the political landscape evolves, Trump's claims regarding election integrity are especially notable. He has repeatedly suggested that there will be significant cheating in upcoming elections, setting the stage for potential disputes. This narrative of impending electoral fraud aligns with a broader Republican strategy to delegitimize electoral outcomes when they do not favor the party. In this context, Trump's suggestion that he would not certify election results if he loses is particularly troubling. It reveals an authoritarian mindset that prioritizes personal ambition over democratic processes. By sowing distrust in electoral integrity, Trump aims to mobilize his base while creating a narrative that shifts blame onto his opponents. Such tactics threaten the very foundations of democracy as they undermine public trust in electoral institutions and processes. Donald Trump's recent interview with Maria Bartiromo serves as a stark reminder of the political climate in America and the potential ramifications of his rhetoric. By painting himself as a protector while simultaneously threatening to use military force against dissenters, Trump embodies a troubling authoritarian strain within American politics. In contrast, leaders like Governor Walz offer a more constructive vision focused on collective governance and public welfare. As the country approaches the next election cycle, Trump's bizarre claims highlight the urgent need for a more informed public discourse. Voters must critically examine the implications of political rhetoric and the consequences of governance styles that prioritize division over unity. The stakes are high, and the future of American democracy may very well depend on the choices made in the coming months. It is crucial that citizens remain vigilant, hold their leaders accountable, and advocate for a government that serves the interests of all, rather than one that promotes fear and division.